Hello, and many thanks for joining OBN Horn of Africa. This is our weekly program, Future Africa, and I'm Pantam Belete hosting this program. Today, I'm joined by a very special person who joins me from UK, Sharmake Ali, political commentator and activist. In this episode, we're going to discuss the Memorandum of Understanding signed between Ethiopia and Somaliland and the current contention between Somalia and Ethiopia. Till the end of our program, stay with us. Sharmake, thank you for joining me and welcome to this program.
Thank you very much, Fantahern, and thank you very much, OBN, for having me.
Great. Before we directly go to our today's discussion, would you tell us a bit about yourself? Who is Sharmake Ali?
Yeah, I'm Sharmake Ali. I'm based here in London, United Kingdom. I'm a Somalilander diaspora. I'm an activist for the cause of the re-recognition of Somaliland. Yeah, I hope to sort of illuminate some of the fake stories and disinformation that's been spread over the years to try and hide Somaliland.
How do you see the Ethiopia's legitimacy in making sea access from neighboring countries?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Fantahern. And when you consider some of the factors at play for Ethiopia, yes, Ethiopia's quest for sea access is understandable. Ethiopia is the largest landlocked country by population. It's one of the fastest growing economies in Africa. Recently, it joined BRICS, which brings its own, vast economic opportunities. However, Ethiopia has an economic disadvantage in that Djibouti currently acts as a single point of failure. By this, I mean any disruption to Ethiopia's access through Djibouti could have a severe impact on its economy. And this is why Ethiopia is already diversifying by utilizing other regional ports such as Lamu. Therefore, I think Ethiopia's quest for expanded access to the sea, driven by this need to enhance trade capacity, reduce costs, and diversify its routes. These factors are also supported by Ethiopia's rights under UN clause, which allow it, to enter into agreements with neighboring countries for access to the sea for trade. So, very understandable, Fenton.
What is your perspective on Memorandum of Understanding signed between Ethiopia and Somaliland regarding coastline access?
So the MOU, based on what we know from both President Musa Bihi of Somaliland and Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed of Ethiopia, in my opinion, has the potential to be extremely positive and beneficial for, both Somalilanders and Ethiopians, but also actually for the wider region. What we saw on the 1st of January when the deal was announced was, Somaliland and Ethiopia sending shockwaves across the region, Africa and the world, demonstrating that actually neighbor states can work together and collaborate effectively to address African challenges by using African solutions. The MOU has the potential to highlight the crucial principle, which has been repeated multiple times, of mutual benefit between sovereign states, setting a powerful example of regional cooperation and solidarity, in my opinion. So very positive.
How will the MOU enhance cooperation in areas like economy, security, and climate change for both countries?
I think it's a very good question, because what we've seen is that both countries are committed to comprehensive deals working together. And I think it's very important that actually both countries cooperate on all these sectors, within all these sectors that you've mentioned. So what we've heard so far is that, there's potential for the two countries to deepen economic cooperation, whether it's, exchanging shares in industries or actually opening up each other's economies. And I think from my perspective, that interconnectedness between nation states is so fundamental, ensuring lasting peace, ensuring shared prosperity, and ensuring that actually countries, especially in Africa, realize that they don't have to, operate in this mindset of a zero-sum game we can work together to both win. And it's not a case of if I win, you lose, and if you lose, I win. And I think there's so many other areas which Somaliland and Ethiopia can cooperate in. And the one you've mentioned is obviously climate change, which is a huge challenge for both countries. And I see some of the fantastic work being done in Ethiopia, such as all the trees that were planted most recently, which was actually a fantastic feat, setting world records, I believe. An important thing to state is that since World War II, Western countries realized that by working together and by actually ensuring that there's a interdependency within and between states, there's a larger chance for a shared prosperity and a more peaceful world. But actually, unfortunately, Africa's lagged behind. Unfortunately, Africa, as I said earlier, see each other as competitors, solely competitors, and see each other's relations as being a zero-sum game. However, the MOU has the opportunity to actually completely change this perspective. What that will lead to is, a shared commitment to peace within the region. The two countries who already contribute so much to peace and security in the region, further deepening their ties. And we already see some of the fruits of these early negotiations. So I am extremely positive that deeper relations between Somaliland and Ethiopia will lead to a more peaceful and prosperous Horn of Africa.
Why did Somalia oppose to the MOU signed between Ethiopia and Somaliland concerning sea access and military bases?
I think let's start with, Somalia's overreaction is actually not unique to Ethiopia. I've heard a lot of Ethiopians, wondering actually why has Somalia reacted in the way it has with, this deal between Ethiopia and Somaliland. I think a good example is Somaliland's deal with DP World, where Somalia actually, in a similar fashion to this MOU, criticized both Somaliland and the UAE, right up to the United Nations Security Council. They used every single diplomatic channel possible to combat that deal between Somaliland, DP World, UAE. It's important to note here that actually they failed in that endeavor, and Berbera Port, Somaliland, is actually now the most efficient port in sub-Saharan Africa, not according to me, but actually according to the World Bank. And this will be Somalia's ultimate fate with regards to combating a deal between Somaliland and Ethiopia. However, I think it's actually extremely important to take a minute here to highlight some historical facts. Somalia is frightened because it knows that its 60-year disinformation and propaganda campaign against Somaliland is now being quickly dismantled in front of their eyes. So what do I mean by this? Somaliland's case for re-recognition is both legal and legitimate. And Somalia is now worried because it falsely claims ownership of Somaliland, stressing that any recognition of Somaliland is a violation, the terms we hear every day from Hassan Sheikh Mohammed in Somalia, of its so-called sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, this is totally and utterly false. Somalia developed a myth about how all Somalis in the Horn of Africa were united before the Westerners came and colonized and fragmented Somalis. But it's not true. The reality is that Somaliland is not Somalia and has never actually legally been part of Somalia. Somaliland does not share recent nor ancient history with Somalia, apart from what was a brief 31 years from 1960 to 1991, where Somalia actually illegally occupied Somaliland. I think it's good for your viewers to know that Somaliland is actually the successor state of notable ancient kingdoms and sultanates. And these kingdoms and sultanates were actually very separate to what you know as Somalia today. Somaliland and Somalia do not have a shared history. And again, sorry, just want to really touch upon this because I think it's so fundamental for your viewers to understand the distinction and the distinct relationship between the two countries. So the Republic of Somaliland was actually the 12th independent state in Africa. This place that they're saying they control, they own, actually gained independence before it did. It gained independence via what we know as a royal proclamation from the British, and it was actually recognized by dozens of countries, 30 plus. Whereas actually Somalia Italiana was an Italian colony, as the name suggests, before it became a UN trusteeship in the 50s. And I think this historical context is so important because what it shows your viewers is Somalia has been lying. Ethiopia has unraveled that lie, on an international stage, amplified what we've been saying. And, the West and the rest of the world were actually so extremely sympathetic to Somaliland's cause. And what they said was, go back to Africans and get, re-recognition from Africans, some of your neighbors preferably, and that will open up the door for us to re-recognize you. So Somalia is extremely worried because they know Somaliland's case is both legitimate and legal.
What distinguishes Ethiopia's recent lease agreement with Somaliland from previous agreements made by Somaliland?
You're completely right. So Somaliland is a sovereign de jure state which meets all the conditions set out by Montevideo Convention, which outline, the criteria for statehood. So Somaliland actually signed multiple agreements with, nation states, with, bilateral agreements with nation states, with international organizations, and so on and so forth. So there's no difference. And actually, an interesting fact for you here, Phantom, is that, Somaliland as part of the failed 12 years of talks that were happening between Somaliland and Somalia, actually signed bilateral president-to-president agreements with Somalia itself. So it's absolutely ludicrous that, Somalia now, throws its toys out of the pram.
Why are some African and Western countries trying to incite conflict between Ethiopia and Somalia over the Somaliland agreement?
Phantom, I think, there's several countries who have benefited from taking advantage of Somalia's status as a failed state. If we look at Egypt as an example, it's no secret that they're looking to destabilize the Horn by instigating a proxy war in an attempt to destabilize Ethiopia. They see Ethiopia as their enemy, and they are the only country who will gain by recent moves. Others, view Somalia as a hornet's nest. They've spent billions in Somalia trying to secure it. And they're worried that Somalia will be another Afghanistan, thus essentially causing them political embarrassment, especially after these billions that they spend. And we know what happened the last time, when Afghanistan went the way it did with the Taliban taking over. There are obviously other countries such as Eritrea, which I don't think I need to go into detail about what motivates Eritrea in this. But again, it's a common theme. It's, not selflessness. It's actually selfishness, where they're actually all looking for their own benefits without taking into account regional peace and security.
Good. How will accessing the Red Sea help Ethiopia protect its trade from Houthi attacks and other attacks and piracy?
I think with insecurity across the Red Sea, it's understandable that Ethiopia wants to do more to protect its economic interests, especially when we take into account all the factors that I mentioned earlier. Interestingly, Somaliland's Coast Guard has over the years also protected Somaliland's shores, ensuring that there have been zero instances of piracy, unlike in neighboring Somalia. Therefore, I think there's huge potential for Somaliland and Ethiopia to actually work together in ensuring both Somaliland and Ethiopian interests on the Red Sea are safe and secure. I think this is a fundamental principle, and I think it's extremely important. Somaliland already actually works with the likes of the Americans and the EU naval forces to help protect the Red Sea. So the question is, why not Ethiopia?
Thank you very much. What are your thoughts on Somalia's plan for Ethiopian forces to leave by December 31, 2024, given the security situation in Jubaland, Hirshabelle, and Southwest State?
I think what we've witnessed over the past few months actually is an unprecedented breakdown in relations between the federal government of Somalia and its federal member states. The federal government essentially unilaterally declared that Ethiopian troops will not contribute to the new African Union force also from January 2025. And this has actually angered, as you said, many federal member states. It's further deepened the already existing political rift between the two. Many regional security analysts are predicting that Ethiopian troops leaving will actually create a disastrous vacuum, which ultimately will result in an Afghanistan-like withdrawal, as I said earlier. I think what we will see and what they predict is that Al-Shabaab will swiftly overrun the federal government as well as many of the state governments if Ethiopian troops leave. Therefore, it's not surprising that the federal member states have spoken out in favor of Ethiopian troops staying. Ethiopia has supported Somalia for many years and has actually paid the ultimate price by shedding blood when no other state was willing to do so. They were the first country to support Somalia's state building process. And it's a shame that actually this government in Mogadishu is reacting in the way it is. So if Somalia completely collapsing, I think it's an important question. If Somalia is completely collapsing, and if that serves no one's interest apart from Al-Shabaab, we see, other federal member states like Puntland, who have, stayed pretty silent in terms of what's going on at the moment, whereas we have others who have come out openly and said, as you rightly said, that Ethiopia has been a friend, has been an ally, has actually secured peace for us, given us that breathing room to build our institutions or attempt to build our institutions at least, whereas the federal government has actually not done any of that. We've seen recently with their push with the Maoisle, their arming tribal militias, and how that's failed. We know that the federal government of Somalia actually disproportionately arms those who have either tribal affiliations with the president or who are close allies. And this has created a deep, deep rift between many, many key stakeholders in Somalia. And I think we'll see how this plays out. But I think they will not, and by they I mean the federal member states, take this unilateral directive given by the federal government, and they will not enact it.
All right, thank you very much again. Is Somalia's decision to exclude Ethiopian forces from peacekeeping mission and inviting Egyptian forces advisable and considering Ethiopia's strong opposition?
Not at all. This is a knee-jerk reaction to invite Egypt, and it actually has the potential, in my opinion, to be the most disastrous decision for the Horn of Africa in recent history. Egypt only wants to serve its interests, and it will not care to maintain peace and security in the region. This decision has the potential to lead to, the disintegration of Somalia, whilst only serving Egypt. It's ludicrous. This is why, as I said earlier, many tribes and politicians in Somalia have already dismissed the fact, dismissed the call by the federal government of Somalia for Ethiopians to leave. But actually, recently, they went even further and dismissed Egypt's plans to deploy troops. These politicians and tribal leaders said that they will not welcome Egypt to the cities, towns, and villages under their control. It has reached the point now that only regions controlled specifically by the tribe of Somalia's president and those closely aligned to him have welcomed this decision. It's extremely unfortunate that to date, the decision makers have not taken into account the legitimate concerns of countries in the region, which will be impacted by any involvement from bad actors such as Egypt, who will undoubtedly gain from actively destabilizing the region. They want a proxy war. That is their end goal. They want to destabilize Ethiopia. They want to destabilize Somaliland. And they're the only country here that gains. So it's crazy that the African Union Peace and Security Council has actually supported or come to this decision, and other fund contributing countries potentially may support this decision. But I think countries will realize very quickly, if they haven't already, Egypt's intentions are not altruistic, and they're actually extremely nefarious.
What do you think will this opposition bring to both countries and to the region?
With the intention of escalating the situation and inviting and signing a so-called defense agreement with Egypt, inviting Egyptian troops to Somalia. And as I said earlier, this is nothing more than an overreaction and a ploy by Somalia in an attempt to strong arm Ethiopia. But I think it's a huge miscalculation. And I think it's an extremely dangerous game which Somalia are playing. I think what we've seen is since Somalia changed their foreign minister, we've seen a shift in policy by Somalia when it comes to Somaliland and in Ethiopia. The architect of this shift is a populist foreign minister who actually, like many other Somalian government officials, is a former Al-Shabaab member. President Hassan Sheikh has approved this approach, as I think it provides him a smokescreen, which actually pacifies disgruntled Somalians who are frustrated with his government. So I think Ethiopia was well and truly right in the statement that it released yesterday, because as we discussed earlier, Egypt's interests in the region are not for peace, are not for security, are not for prosperity, and are not in the interest of Somalia, Ethiopia, Somaliland, or the region at whole. I think Egypt, as I said earlier, is looking for a proxy war. What we know is that there are talks that there'll be a 5,000 troop contribution to OSOM forces, with a potential further 5,000 troops actually outside of the OSOM contingent. And as you said, yes, already Egyptian war planes, military planes, have landed in Mogadishu, Somalia, delivering cargo of weapons. And I think the issue here is we've seen that Somalia is not capable of actually managing, the arms it receives, with a huge proliferation amongst, militias, right up to arms reaching Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab now use the latest weapons as they were gifts provided by corrupt and incompetent Somalian officials. And I think the world definitely sort of realizes this, but they realize that they've made a huge mistake when they lifted the arms embargo on Somalia. And now the only people that will pay the price is us in the region, because not only has Somalia, called upon Egypt to, start this proxy war, but actually they're attempting to start a proxy war in Somaliland as well by organizing, funding, arming warlords and militia in Somaliland in an attempt to destabilize Somaliland, to try and delegitimize it, because they know that the world knows that Somaliland is a peaceful, stable democracy with over 6 million citizens who regularly vote for their president and parliament, which is in stark contrast to Somalia, which is a failed state, as we know. Thank you.
What do you recommend other stakeholders and countries in the region to keep their peace and security?
I think, first of all, I think people need to, or other countries need to actually convince Somalia and show Somalia that these smokescreens, in order to try and cover up their, incompetence, will not work. There are many, many key stakeholders in Somalia. 70% of Somalia's budget is actually, donor funded. Which means that they have huge leverage in Somalia, and I think can very quickly and easily convince Somalia that they need to wise up, like Somaliland and Ethiopia, and be invested in, ensuring peace, security, but also prosperity, for its people and for the region.
As we wrap up this program, if you have any message to convey, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Fantahim. I think just a couple of points that I wanted to make. I think I've already mentioned that, Somaliland has a legitimate legal case. It also has a legitimate moral case for re-recognition. Somaliland is not after independence, as some say, because Somaliland is actually already a de jure independent state, but what it's after is re-recognition. Somaliland is based on the 26th of June 1960 borders, which comply with African Union laws, because we will be abiding by those post-colonial borders, and not creating any new borders. And this was actually confirmed by an African Union fact-finding mission in 2005, which said that Somaliland's case is unique. The African Union itself realized, after sending that fact-finding mission, that re-recognizing Somaliland will not open a Pandora's box, because Somaliland's case is legal. Somaliland, which gained its independence in 1960s, before Somalia, had Somalia pretty much illegally occupy it for 31 years. And that time came to an end on May 18th, 1991, when Somaliland, reasserted its sovereignty. I think it's also necessary here to point out that Somaliland is not like Somalia. Somaliland is peaceful. Somaliland is democratic, and Somaliland wants to work with everyone who wants to work with it. What I call the rules of positive bilateral relations in the region, which has the potential, in my opinion, to serve as a case study for African students for generations to come. And this is so long as both Somaliland and Ethiopia, during these negotiations, adhere to the key principle, which they've mentioned, of seeking a win-win solution. Somaliland, is a de jure state, like Ethiopia, so both countries must also adhere to the principle, legal principle, of the equality of states, and negotiate in good faith. And like everyone else, not directly involved in the negotiations, I'm looking forward to reviewing the details of the deal when the deal is announced. So thank you very much, Fantahim.
Yeah, Sharmake Ali, political commentator and activist, thank you for your time and insight.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
Dear viewers, this brings us to the end. Thank you for watching, and stay connected with other programs of OBN Horn of Africa.